So this video is going to be divided into two sections, the first half being why I hated this movie and the second half showing how I would fix it. If you're here for my general thoughts on the movie, stick around for the first half and skip to the end where I give my closing thoughts. Or if you want to see how I fixed it, just skip to this point here. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and let me explain why this movie is a piece of shit. Joker, Folie A Deux was a crappy movie, and the sad part is, it didn't have to be. I've seen a lot of discourse online saying the movie was pointless, and while I agree there is no need for it to be made, they could have at least tried to care a little about what they were making. After having seen it, I must say I haven't been this frustrated after watching a movie in a long time. The reason I hated it so much wasn't because it was necessarily pointless, but because while watching it, I could see so much potential with the substance present, and the filmmakers decided to do nothing with it. The basic plot is that Arthur Fleck is in Arkham after the events of the first movie and is awaiting trial to see if he's insane or just plain evil. While that's happening, he ends up falling for a fellow inmate that is a massive fan of his, showing him that there are hundreds if not thousands of people rooting for him. Just from that alone, I could think of so many possibilities of where the story could go, and we could see how much Arthur has changed. What kind of influence and power does he now have? How could it manifest with his personal relationships and the outcome of the trial? How has this affected the social and political stability of Gotham? Is Arthur just a crazy man in need of help, or is he now just been reduced to a bastion of pure evil? Well, if any of those ideas sound interesting, too bad. This movie explores barely a smidge of that, and instead decides to give us a 2.5-hour meandering mess. What makes this even worse is that this movie actively tarnishes the first one, not only answering questions to events that were left ambiguous as to whether or not they actually happened, but also destroying the impact and our perception of Arthur's character. Everything they had built in the first one with Arthur and where they had left off feels completely pointless now. Why? Because they reduce Arthur from this disturbing menace into a pathetic shell of his former self. Basically, they just reversed his arc. Through the events of the movie, he gains confidence by not only having relations with Harley, but seeing how much influence he has over crazy people in Arkham and larger society. But as he's in court and people from the first movie are just explaining how much he scared them, he begins to break and feel sorry for what he did. It basically ends with him admitting that the perception society has of Joker is wrong, and that it's just a persona he put up. In reality, he's just a sad, broken man. It might sound interesting, but this is why the movie is stupid and does not work. If the first film was the birth of the Joker, why not carry on that character development into this movie? The point was, at the end of the first movie, any semblance of Arthur was gone. All that's left is a maniacal, egotistical, manipulative psychopath, aka the Joker we all know. I think Todd made this in response to people taking the wrong message away from the first film. You know, the ones saying Joker was right and like he was a hero. But if you're trying to show that Joker is in fact not a hero, why not just work with the characteristics of the character you're basing it on? Joker in the comics and other adaptations is an irredeemable monster, responsible for countless atrocities. This film could have shown us how evil Joker is without tarnishing the integrity of his character. They could have easily done a story about how he manipulates Harley and everyone around him, causing more chaos just because he likes it. They could have gone so much deeper with the evil present in Arthur, making it impossible for us to sympathize with him. It was such a bizarre choice, and with the way they ended the movie, let's just say there's no way this adaptation of Joker will ever recover from what this movie did. Also, the music in this movie didn't work at all. They decided to go the Moulin Rouge route, taking pre-existing pop tracks and remaking them into a musical format. Unfortunately, it doesn't work because the film has no idea what makes a musical work. In the best musicals, the songs are not just to show us the internal thoughts of a character or to showcase a particular environment, but it also gives us a chance to showcase the perspective of multiple characters at once. Sure, it can be catchy and visually stimulating, but it's also a unique way to show conflict in song form. There are so many instances in this movie where it feels like they just wanted to shove a show tune in, even if it completely destroys the pacing or tension within a scene. And on top of that, we basically only get Arthur's perspective on things, which most of the time boils down to how he loves Harley or just how crazy he is. After hearing songs covering those topics like 9 times in a row, it gets old really quick. Harley sings sometimes, but it doesn't reveal much about her character and is mostly in service to Arthur. Lady Gaga was fine in the role, but there is nothing to her character other than she likes Arthur because he's Joker. The movie title translated is called Madness of Two, but the movie never goes into Harley's psychology as to why she's infatuated with him. The direction from Todd Phillips also fell flat, lacking any of the life or suspense from the first movie. It's been reported how Todd Phillips said he basically made this movie on the go, not really caring, and I gotta say, bud, I can tell. And so could the people in my theater. Seriously, there was like a group of 7 college students and a couple sitting behind me, and by the halfway point, everyone had left. Me having the theater to myself was the best part of watching this movie. What an embarrassment. So if you made it this far in, you're probably wondering what I meant by how I fixed Joker 2. Well, as I watched the movie, I was creating a rewrite in my head of how this could have possibly worked. I wouldn't want a sequel to the first film anyway, but if I had a gun to my head and was forced to make one, this is what I would have done. Act 1 basically starts where this movie does, showing Arthur in Arkham, only instead of Arthur being a sad boy, we see him as he was at the end of the first movie, super forthright and outgoing. He's beloved by the fellow inmates but hated by the guards because he constantly undermines their authority. He's basically super confident and charismatic, going on about how he's a changed man and how he's no longer Joker, as that was an alternate personality that took over him. However, we can see there's just something off with him. It's extremely uncanny to see Arthur like this. Whenever he goes back to his cell, he's smiling and cracking jokes to the other inmates, but as the cell door closes, he immediately loses his smile and then breaks out into a slow dance, showing that this could possibly be a facade. We then cut to see a woman, Harleen Quinzel, wake up in an empty apartment. While it's nice and somewhat tidy, it's a completely sad and pathetic existence. When she goes out for work, we also see that Gotham hasn't improved much. The city is still riddled with crime. We see her in her daily life, in and out of work, and she's a bit of an oddball and recluse. She's a counselor for more elite members of Gotham, judges, lawyers, CEOs, etc. We see her in counseling sessions and she'll make inappropriate jokes about her clients' problems. We can see that she clearly hates the clientele she has to work with. Whenever she's on break, she eats alone. No man will give her a second glance. Women and other coworkers won't talk to her. It's a total lonely existence. This changes though when she's confronted by a politically progressive lawyer named, I don't know, let's call him Dave. Dave has been hired to represent the now infamous Joker in court. He believes that Arthur is an abused man neglected by the system, and he wants someone to do a psychological profile for him on the defense. Harleen, always wanting to expand her career into criminal psychology, agrees to help him on the defense. Act 2 of the movie would be the interviews with Harleen and Joker, as well as building the defense with Dave the lawyer. This whole part of the movie will be dedicated to showing how in these psychological profiles, Joker begins to slowly take over the conversations to manipulate Harleen for her affection. Maybe he learns about her childhood and parents, how she grew up with an absent father and an overly strict mother. We can see how after each conversation with him, she begins making more and more unhinged remarks to her other clients, back-talking her co-workers, or just committing acts of vandalism to get a false sense of empowerment. Joker's words have inspired her to take control of her life. In the meantime, Arthur's beef with the Arkham guards begins to escalate because of his behavior. One of the guards beats him, but Harleen comes and puts an end to it. At this point in the movie, Harleen begins to struggle with her newly found feelings she has for Joker. Then comes time for the trial. Act 3 of the movie would be the broadcasted trial of Arthur Fleck, the trial of the century. The prosecution would come from the young, charming, and more conservative lawyer known as Harvey Dent, who believes Arthur is nothing more than a criminal whose actions were completely unjustified. The trial would basically be the conversation people had about the first movie. What created Arthur, and was he justified in his actions? This would be a good way to get some meta commentary as well as advance the plot. As the trial goes along, we see how Arthur's influence on his supporters is crazy. Any chance he gets, he tries to make comments or faces to win over the crowd. However, when Harvey begins bringing people who he directly affected, like one one of the fathers from the Wall Street guys he killed. We can see Arthur is cracking a little, seeing how the pressure begins weighing on his ego. It goes bad when Harleen gives her psychological profile in defense of Arthur, and Harvey begins to tear her arguments apart. This begins to upset her, thinking she's failed Joker. It all becomes too much for Harley as she breaks down and confesses her love for Arthur, shocking not only the courtroom, but the entire city. It gets to a point where his ego is bothered so much, he decides to fire his defense team in the middle of court. Afterwards, not only is Dave upset by this, but Harleen speaks to him asking why he would do this. What about them? She then tells Arthur with tears in her eyes that she loves him. Arthur just laughs, saying he doesn't need her. She's a pathetic loser that would never make a difference. Heartbroken, Harleen begins to break down back at her apartment, trashing the place. The next day, Arthur is now defending himself, basically trying to make people laugh at his sick jokes. Harvey brings people from the first film, specifically Gary and his neighbor Sophie, to the stand. They talk about how much he terrified them and destroyed their lives due to media interference and his supporters harassing them. As they make more personal attacks on Arthur's character, we see his smile start to dissipate. Seeing how he's losing support from the crowd, he breaks down, bursting into an angry rant. The whole city is on edge, as well as Harleen watching from her apartment. Looking into the cameras, he launches into a rant like in the first movie about not only the abuse he suffered from society, but also from the guards at Arkham. He stands on top of a table, ranting in a twisted battle cry as his supporters cheer him on. Hours go by, and at the end of the trial, the jury finds Arthur guilty, sentencing him to death. But just as the police are about to take Arthur away, the wall of the court explodes as clown-masked thugs pour in and try to help a dazed and confused Arthur. As the riot and gunfight breaks out between protesters and police, Arthur begins running away but eventually gets caught by police and sent back to Arkham. Arthur is silent as he's escorted by the guards, although they don't take him to his cell and instead take him back into the security room where they proceed to beat the out of him. The one guard Arthur antagonized throughout the movie in particular says the city is now leading an investigation into the treatment of inmates in Arkham. Arthur just laughs and mocks him. They're getting what they deserve. They continue to beat him down, and just as Arthur can't take anymore, the room erupts into gunfire. All of the guards are dead. He looks up to see Harleen in red, white, and black, holding a machine gun, with a couple of masked Joker thugs holding guns as well. Arthur is stunned by this, smiling to himself. I knew you'd come through. She then walks up to him, taking blood from one of the guards, paints a bloody smile on his face, and kisses him, giving her a blood smile as well. They both begin to erupt in laughter as they make their way out of Arkham, releasing all of the inmates and drive off into a whimsical sunset together. So that's it. That's how I would make Joker Folie A Deux. Now with this version, I think it works better because the story has a clear focus on what it wants to achieve. It shows the natural progression of the story, creates a better reason as to why Harleen falls for him, and it keeps the provocative themes from the first movie while introducing new ones. I felt like the best part of the first movie was how people were split on the morality of Arthur's actions. Yes, it was clearly wrong what he did, but you totally see why he lashed out the way he did. And in this rewrite, even though he's become a manipulative narcissist, the trial and factioning sides could represent the beliefs people had about the first movie. Both are given their chance to state their arguments. The progressives are naive to the pure evil Arthur has become, but the more conservative-leaning people are blind to see the societal conditions that led to Joker's creation in the first place. And when it comes to the stuff with Harley, it needs to be complex reasoning as to why she wants to be with Joker and showcase the inherent toxic nature of their relationship. Joker actively sought to discover her flaws and use them to manipulate her, just as he did with the inmates, Dave the lawyer, and parts of society. It shows that he didn't really care about the outcome of the trial because he knew either way he would end up on top with the influence he had over people. The reason he became angered in my version was because the prosecution was stepping on the one thing Joker can't stand having tarnished: his ego, a trait and flaw ever so common with the Joker character. That's why he fired his defense and belittled Harley. They failed to defend his character, so he had no use for them, taking matters into his own hands. As for the ending where Harley rescues Arthur, she comes back thinking she's proving her love to him, when in reality she's desperate for a connection. When Arthur sees her this way, I felt it was better left ambiguous as to whether or not he expected it. Did he plan for Harley to turn all along, or was he just seizing an opportunity in the moment? Either way, Arthur is a sick man taking advantage of anyone he sees as weaker than him. Is this a perfect rewrite? No. Do I even think this sequel needed to be made? No. But I think it would have been a much more satisfying experience than what we got, and would have been more respectful to the story and characters they were adapting. Sadly, we don't have that. Overall, the actual movie we got was just a complete waste. It could have been so much better, but they just wanted to troll fans of the first and the audience as well. I'm going to give Joker Folie A Deux a 3 out of 10.